All right, today we're going to dive into a really powerful chapter from Howard Zinn's classic, A People's History of the United States. It's a chapter called The Intimately Oppressed, and it digs into a part of history that Zinn says hasn't just been ignored, it's been actively hidden from view.
So, let's start with this central question Zinn basically throws at us. What if history as we know it just forgot half the people? I mean, imagine reading a story about our country, but every other page has been ripped out. That's kind of the picture he paints for the history of women. It's not just a minor oversight, he argues, it's a complete distortion of our entire past. In this quote right here, this gets to the absolute heart of his argument. For Zinn, this invisibility isn't an accident. No way. The fact that women are so often missing from the history books is in itself the most powerful evidence of their oppression. Their silence in the official story, well, it speaks volumes. Okay, so here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with this idea of a history of invisibility. Then we'll look at the specific nature of oppression Zinn describes. After that, we'll see how the seeds of resistance started to grow, leading to the incredible declaration of sentiments. And finally, we'll tie it all back to what Zinn was trying to do with his people's history. So let's start there, this idea of a history of invisibility. What does Zinn really mean when he says that half the country has been basically forgotten? Well, just think back to the history you learned in school. Zinn says it's one of those things that's almost painfully obvious once you start looking for it. Our big historical stories are almost always built around traditionally male roles, right? The famous explorers, the founding fathers, the generals, the big business tycoons, they were pretty much all men. And by focusing only on these figures, Zinn argues, history books just erase the experiences and the importance of women from the picture. Okay, so if women were submerged, as Zinn puts it, what was the mechanism holding them down? Well, he argues that the whole system of oppression was justified by a very convenient and, frankly, twisted interpretation of biology. Zinn coins this really powerful phrase, intimate oppression. What he means is that a simple biological fact, that women are the ones who bear children, was taken and warped into a social reason for their subordination. It was used to cast them as natural servants, as companions, as caretakers, essentially confining them to the home. And this had huge economic effects, making them dependent and keeping them far away from public life and any real power. And this is where he draws a really stunning parallel. He compares the logic used to oppress women directly to the logic of racism. Think about it. Just as skin color was used as a biological reason to justify slavery, he says a woman's biological role was used to justify her second-class status. And for enslaved women, this was just a brutal double whammy, oppressed for their race and for their sex. But of course, a history of oppression is always met with a history of resistance. So now let's look at how the very first organized movements to challenge the system really started to take root. The 19th century becomes this incredible turning point. And as Zinn points out, this resistance didn't just pop up out of thin air. For example, women became key organizers in the anti-slavery movement. And in doing so, they learned the very skills of public speaking and organizing that they were constantly told they shouldn't possess. At the same time, you had working-class women, like the famous mill girls in Lowell, Massachusetts, organizing some of the first-ever industrial strikes. These were the early, powerful feminist movements, and they were challenging everything. And all that organizing and activism leads us to one of the most pivotal moments in this entire story, the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848. This is where a group of truly revolutionary women got together and drafted a document that would send shockwaves through American history. Just look at that. So simple, but so radical. By adding just 2 words, "and women," to the Declaration of Independence, they performed an incredible act. They were taking the founding ideals of the entire nation and claiming them for themselves. They were pointing a giant finger at the hypocrisy of a country that preached liberty while denying it to half its own citizens. And their declaration wasn't just about high-minded principles. Oh no, it got specific. It laid out a list of concrete, real-world injuries. It was about being legally and socially shut out of everything. No right to vote, no right to your own property or wages, no access to colleges or good jobs. And as Zinn emphasizes, they made a really chilling accusation, that the system was designed to actively destroy a woman's self-respect as a tool of control. So why is this story so important to Zinn? In this last section, let's connect the dots and see how the struggle of the intimately oppressed is actually the key to his entire project of rewriting American history. I mean, this quote from the man himself says it all, doesn't it? His entire goal is to flip the historical lens. Instead of telling the story from the top down, from the perspective of presidents and generals, he wants to tell it from the bottom up, from the viewpoint of the conquered, the enslaved, and, yes, the women. He wants to dig up the histories of everyone who was silenced. So, you see, the story of women's oppression isn't just another chapter in the book for Zinn. It's a perfect example of his entire philosophy. He believed that to really understand a country, you can't just listen to the powerful. You have to seek out the voices of the victims, the rebels, and all the people who have been pushed to the margins of society. And that leaves us with this final, really important question to think about. Zinn's work isn't just about adding a few forgotten names to the old history books. It's about fundamentally changing our perspective. It forces us to ask, what other stories have been left out? And how does seeing the past through the eyes of the intimately oppressed completely change the way we understand our present?